All right, let's jump right in. Welcome back to this explainer. Look, if you're out there managing a major infrastructure project, a mining operation, or some massive corporate development here in India, you already know the golden rule: land is everything. Today, we are going to demystify the heavily bureaucratic 2023 overhaul of India's forest conservation laws. We're taking the Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Adhiniyam, which you probably know as the old Forest Conservation Act, and we're transforming it from this incredibly dense legal maze into a clear, actionable guidebook for total compliance. Let's get to it. Okay, let's dive into this, because this right here represents the central tension defining modern development. Think about it. How exactly do you build a nation's critical infrastructure, the roads, the railways, the massive industries, while simultaneously saving its forests and ensuring ecological security? It's literally a giant tightrope walk, and this 2023 Act, well, it's the government's latest balancing pole.
The government actually explicitly outlines a dual mandate right in the text to solve this. Sure, they absolutely want to facilitate economic needs, but they are directly aligning forest conservation with India's really aggressive national targets. We're talking about hitting net zero emissions by 2070 and creating a massive, and I mean massive, carbon sink of 2.5 to 3.0 billion tons of CO2 equivalents by 2030. Every single regulation we're about to cover today is built right on top of these twin pillars.
So, to help you navigate this, here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the Green Balancing Act and the evolution of the law. Then, we'll clearly define what land is covered, look at private leases and approvals, calculate the cost of development, and wrap it all up with the compliance checklist. If you're a corporate project manager, consider this your ultimate guide to understanding exactly how the law works and the step-by-step procedural moves you absolutely must make to safely navigate it.
Okay, moving into Section 1, the Green Balancing Act, and Section 2, Evolution of the Law. Let's move to the timeline and see how this actually builds. We have to rewind to 1980 when the original Forest Conservation Act was enacted to basically slam the brakes on unregulated land diversion. Then in 1988, they realized the law needed some teeth, right? So they introduced penal provisions for the rule breakers. Fast forward a bit to 2016, and the Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act was set up to manage the huge amounts of money collected for forest protection. And finally, that brings us to the pivotal 2023 overhaul, renaming the act and drastically tightening the whole framework to perfectly balance national security, the economy, and our ecology.
Let's jump to Section 3, what land is covered?
This is huge. Under the new Section 1A, the 2023 definition finally removes literally decades of historical ambiguity. Covered land is now strictly defined as any land formally notified as a forest under the 1927 Act, or, and you really need to pay attention to this part, any land recorded as forest in government records on or after October 25, 1980. This gives user agencies absolute clarity. No more guessing, you can check the records and know precisely if your project is sitting on protected ground.
But, while the government is fiercely protecting those recorded forests, they're also carving out some very specific, pragmatic exemptions to keep the nation moving. For instance, if you're building strategic linear projects within 100 kilometers of the line of control, or security infrastructure up to 10 hectares, or even tiny transport access patches up to 0.10 hectares to connect habitations, well, the rigid rules are relaxed a bit. It's a very clear prioritization of national security and vital connectivity.
Moving on to Section 4, Private Leases and Approvals.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how things used to work. Historically, states were handing over forest leases for things like mining to private entities way before the proper federal checks were even complete. The wording in this 2023 amendment explicitly shuts that down. No way, no how. It strictly requires prior central government approval before any state authority can assign forest land by way of lease to any private person, agency, or corporation, period. So how do you actually get that central approval? Well, you have to go through the Parivish online portal. I like to think of this as a strict two-key launch system. Key number 1, you submit your application online to get a Stage 1 in-principle approval. Once you've got that in hand, you must pay all your compensatory levies and submit a compliance report. Only after that second key is turned will the central government actually grant the Stage 2 final approval, legally allowing you to use that land. And for those of you specifically seeking mining leases, the rules are even tighter. You have to submit a highly detailed, competent authority-approved mining plan, complete with pre- and post-mining land use strategies and a super strict mine closure plan. And listen to this, because it's the golden rule. You cannot break any forest land early. Zero pre-approval land breaking is allowed. None. Save for extremely limited authorized temporary setups. You simply cannot touch that land.
Now, the good news for your project timelines is that while this massive bureaucracy is rigorous, it is legally time-bound. Depending on the sheer scale of your proposed project, decisions will take between 30 to 100 working days, but expect intense scrutiny for sure. At the state level, project screening committees are evaluating you. At the central level, statutory advisory committees are weighing in. And if your project is over 40 hectares, a conservator of forests has to do a mandatory field inspection. If it's over 100 hectares, the nodal officer themselves is coming out to inspect the site.
All right, Section 5, the cost of development.
First up here is the literal visual math of compensatory afforestation, or CA. Basically, if you divert a hectare of forest land, you have to offset it. It's the cost of doing business. If you provide non-forest land for this offset, you must provide an equivalent size, so a straight 1-to-1 ratio. But if you can only provide degraded, unclassed forest land for your offset, the penalty jumps. You have to provide 2 times the size of the diverted area to be afforested.
So the crucial point is that just planting trees isn't enough. You also have to pay the net present value, or NPV. This is the calculated financial quantification of the environmental services lost when you cut down that forest. User agencies must pay this hefty NPV sum directly into CAMPA funds. This basically ensures the true worth of the green cover is captured financially to combat climate change, and it funds massive regeneration and wildlife protection efforts across the country.
But you know, the 2023 rules also introduced something surprisingly innovative. It's called Accredited Compensatory Afforestation, or ACA. This actually allows private individuals or entities to proactively grow forests on non-forest land. If those trees survive for at least 5 years and achieve a 0.4 canopy density, the developer can essentially bank this forest. Later on, they can use it or swap it for their own project offsets, or even trade it. It's a really brilliant way to incentivize preemptive greening.
Finally, Section 6, the compliance checklist. Let's get into the rapid-fire steps.
All right, grab a pen, because here are your mandatory, non-negotiable moves. Step 1. Secure both your Stage 1 in principle and Stage 2 final approvals exclusively through the Profesh online portal. Step 2. Have your incredibly detailed mining and closure plans approved and submitted. Step 3. Fully fund those CAMPA accounts by paying your required net present value and compensatory afforestation levies. And Step 4, the absolute most important rule we've talked about: never, ever break ground on forest land before the final ink is completely dry. Because let me tell you, if you do jump the gun, the stakes are severe. Breaking these rules doesn't just mean a slap on the wrist with corporate fines. Under the amended act, whoever contravenes or abets the contravention of these provisions can actually face simple imprisonment for up to 15 days. And yes, the law explicitly states that if an authority or government department commits the offense, the head of the department or the person directly in charge of the business is held personally liable. No way around it.
And the mechanism for enforcing all of this is incredibly swift. Empowered officers, specifically your divisional forest officers, deputy conservators of forests and above, now have the explicit authority to directly initiate legal proceedings. They can file complaints against offenders right there in a court of law. So the bureaucracy isn't just monitoring you anymore. They have the direct power to prosecute you.
Which really brings us to the ultimate question on our final slide today. Can legislation, no matter how rigorous or perfectly designed, truly offset our ecological footprint? The Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhan Adhiniyam definitely creates a strict, monetized, and structured pathway for development, but you know, the real work of maintaining our planet's carbon sink goes way beyond just checking a compliance box. It requires genuine, sustainable intent. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, keep balancing those priorities, and I will catch you in the next one.